December 5th, 1945. 5 Navy bombers lift off from Fort Lauderdale on a routine afternoon training run over calm, shallow tropical water. 90 minutes in, the flight leader's voice comes over the radio. His compasses have stopped working. He cannot tell which way is land. The ocean beneath him, he says, does not look the way it should. Neither does the sun. The transmissions grow stranger, then fainter, then they stop. A rescue seaplane with 13 men aboard flies out to find them, radios in once and is never heard from again. 14 airmen, 13 rescuers, one afternoon. Not a single body was recovered, not one seat cushion, not one fuel slick, not one scrap of aluminum. The Navy's official board reached for language it almost never uses about an accident over its own coastline. Cause unknown. There is a photograph taken in 2004 off the Ogasawara Islands south of Japan that you should sit with before you decide what is possible in the sea. It shows a living giant squid, Architeuthis, tentacles spread, striking a baited line more than half a mile down. It was captured by 2 Japanese researchers, Tsunami Kubodera and Kyoichi Mori, and it was, at that time, the first clear image of the animal alive in its own world. For roughly 2,000 years before that shutter clicked, the giant squid was the kraken. It was the thing drunk sailors saw. It was folklore. It was a lie that serious educated men had agreed to stop taking seriously, and then a camera found it. That is the paradox I cannot walk away from. The kraken was real the entire time we were laughing at it. So the honest question is not whether there is a monster in the Bermuda Triangle. The honest question is how we could possibly know that there isn't. To understand the water, you have to understand what is under it, because almost nobody who repeats the Bermuda Triangle story ever mentions the geography. We picture warm turquoise shallows, cruise ships, Florida. The truth is that the region sits directly over one of the most violent pieces of the planet's crust in the entire Atlantic. Just north of Puerto Rico, the seafloor drops without warning into the Puerto Rico Trench. At its lowest point, the Milwaukee Deep, the water is more than 8,000 meters straight down. That is deeper than Mount Everest is tall. It is the deepest water in the entire Atlantic Ocean, and it is hiding a short flight from Miami, underneath one of the busiest shipping and aviation corridors on Earth. For most of human history, that darkness was genuinely unknown. It was blank on the maps, and on old maps, blank space was never left empty. Cartographers filled it with serpents and leviathans and coiling things, because the men who sailed those routes came back describing serpents and leviathans and coiling things. We were taught to read those illustrations as decoration, as the imagination of a superstitious age. But sailors are not poets. Sailors are witnesses. They spent their lives on that surface watching it, and when hundreds of them across centuries and languages describe the same thing rising alongside a hull, the modern habit of calling all of it hallucination is a decision, not a conclusion. It is the same decision that buried the kraken for 2,000 years. Here is where the record gets deliberately muddied, and it is worth being precise about who muddied it. The phrase Bermuda Triangle did not come from the Navy or from science or from any government file. It was coined in 1964 by a writer named Vincent Gaddis in a pulp adventure magazine called Argosy, in an article titled The Deadly Bermuda Triangle. A decade later, in 1974, an author named Charles Berlitz turned it into a global bestseller, stacking disappearance on disappearance until the region felt cursed. The stated reason for all of it was to sell magazines and paperbacks, and it worked spectacularly. But then something honest happened. A reference librarian named Larry Cushy spent years pulling the original sources behind each famous case, and in 1975 he published a book methodically taking the legend apart. He found that many of the eerie details had been invented. Ships listed as vanishing in calm weather had actually gone down in documented storms. Some had disappeared nowhere near the triangle at all. The chilling final radio quotes attributed to doomed pilots often had no source in any transcript. Cushy's conclusion was blunt. The mystery had been manufactured, and most people who tell this story stop right there, satisfied, because the debunking feels like the end. But watch what the debunking quietly does. In cleaning up the exaggerations, it sweeps away the real cases with them. Because Larry Cush did not and could not explain everything. He could not explain the USS Cyclops. In March of 1918, that Navy collier, a ship the length of a city block, steamed north from the Caribbean carrying more than 300 men and vanished so completely that it remains the single largest loss of life in United States Navy history, unconnected to combat. No distress call, no debris field, no survivors, no storm on record along her route. A ship you could see from a mile away, with 300 human beings aboard, erased between two ports. The exaggerations were a lie. That does not make the disappearances a lie, so what could actually take a ship, or a plane, and leave nothing? The rational answers are real, and they're frightening in their own right. Start with rogue waves. For most of the 20th century, oceanographers insisted these could not exist. Walls of water 2, 3, 4 times the height of the surrounding sea, appearing from nowhere and vanishing in seconds. Sailors reported them constantly. Science dismissed them, again, as exaggeration. Then, on the first day of 1995, an instrument on the Draupner platform in the North Sea recorded one directly. A wall of water nearly 26 metres high in an otherwise ordinary sea. A European Space Agency project called MaxWave later used satellite radar to scan the oceans and found these monsters were not rare at all. They form, they crush, they disappear, and they leave a debris field that scatters and sinks before anyone arrives. Notice the shape of that story. Sailors said it was real. Science said it was myth. The sailors were right. Then there is the water itself. Beneath the seafloor in many parts of the world, including the Atlantic margins, lie vast frozen deposits of methane hydrate. When they destabilize, they can belch enormous volumes of gas up through the water column. In 2003, physicists at Monash University in Australia, Joseph Monaghan among them, modelled what happens when a ship crosses water suddenly saturated with rising gas. The density of the sea collapses. The ocean can no longer hold the hull up. A vessel does not capsize in the ordinary sense. It simply loses its buoyancy and drops, straight down in seconds, into water 8,000 metres deep. There would be no wreckage on the surface. There would be nothing at all. Now hold those two real mechanisms in your mind, and hold the trench, and hold the kraken, and consider one more fact. There is a second animal down there we only confirmed in this century. The colossal squid, Messonychoteuthis hamiltoni, larger and heavier than the giant, armed not just with suckers but with rotating hooks, and carrying the largest eyes of any animal that has ever lived, eyes the size of dinner plates, evolved to gather light in a place with none. We have never seen a fully grown one hunting in the deep. We have only the pieces that floated up. We know it is enormous. We do not know how enormous, because we have never watched it live. I keep turning one detail over, the one that stops me every time I try to file this away as solved. It is not the ships. Ships sink. It is the total, surgical absence. Rogue waves scatter wreckage. Storms leave oil and splinters and eventually bodies. Ordinary disasters are messy. They give the sea back a little of what they take. What unsettles me is the specific class of cases where the ocean gives back nothing. No wreckage, no fuel, no remains, no distress. As though something had not sunk the vessel but taken it. And I notice that this is the exact category the debunkers step around most carefully, because a fabricated quote is easy to disprove and an empty ocean is not. Here is the pattern, and once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it. Every single time human beings have declared a sea monster impossible, the deep has eventually produced the animal. The kraken was a myth until 2004. The rogue wave was a myth until 1995. The colossal squid was a rumour stitched from beaks in whale stomachs until we finally had a whole one in our hands. The graveyard of things sailors imagined keeps coughing up real, breathing creatures, decade after decade, and each time the scientific world acts mildly surprised and then moves on as if the lesson does not apply to the next report. The lesson is this: the ocean is the last place on this planet large enough, deep enough, and dark enough for something enormous to live an entire life and never once be seen. More than 80% of the seafloor has never been mapped in real detail. We have better maps of the surface of Mars than of the bottom of the water you have flown over on your way to vacation. And you have flown over it. That is the part that should land in your body, not your head. If you have taken a flight from the East Coast to the Caribbean, you have passed above the trench. You looked down at a flat, calm, sunlit blue and saw nothing, because the surface is designed to show you nothing. Everything the sea is doing, it does underneath. The disappearances are not happening in some distant cursed zone on a paranormal map. They are happening in ordinary water on ordinary routes, above a canyon deeper than any mountain is tall, next to animals we have only just admitted are real. So I'm not going to tell you there is a monster in the Bermuda Triangle. I do not have a body. Nobody does. That is the entire problem, and it may be the entire point. What I will tell you is what we actually know. 27 men left in one afternoon in 1945, and the Navy wrote cause unknown. 300 more left on one ship in 1918, and nobody has found a rivet of it since. Sailors described a monster in that water for as long as there have been sailors, and we filed their testimony under superstition. The same file where we kept the kraken until a camera embarrassed us in 2004. The trench is real. The colossal squid is real. The empty ocean is real. The pattern of calling the deep a liar and being wrong over and over is the most consistent thing in this entire story. Go back to that 2004 photograph. A living thing that every serious person had agreed was a fairy tale, striking out of the black exactly where the fisherman always said it would be. It had been down there the whole time, breathing, hunting, patient, waiting not for us, but simply existing beyond the reach of our cameras and our certainty. It did not care that we had decided it was myth. The water off Florida is calm this afternoon. It is calm almost every afternoon. The planes still fly over it, the ships still cross it, and somewhere beneath that flat, sunlit, agreeable blue, the trench goes down 8,000 meters into a dark we have barely touched, holding whatever it holds in the one place on Earth still large enough to keep a secret that size. The question was never whether the sea has a monster. The question is why we are so certain it doesn't, when it has never once given us a reason to be sure.